You arrive here carrying a quiet question you rarely say out loud. How do I expand the borders of my life without losing myself along the way? Perhaps you have felt the ceiling pressed down, subtle, invisible, learned from years of being told to be realistic, and something in you wonders whether the ceiling is real or simply rehearsed. Notice what happens in your body as you ask this. The shoulders soften a little. The breath slows. Space returns. I see the weight you've been holding, the calendar that never ends, the ambitions you keep editing down to fit other people's fears. You are not wrong for wanting more. You are wise for wanting more that is rightly ordered. Thinking big is not a performance. It is a way of seeing. The bigness that endures does not shout. It clarifies. It does not inflate the ego. It enlarges stewardship. Practical spirituality begins here, at the meeting place where vision touches ground and becomes a path. Emotional neuroscience agrees. Our attention trains our nervous system to prefer certain futures. What you rehearse becomes familiar. What becomes familiar begins to feel safe. What feels safe, you will move toward. When the mind pairs a clear image with steady action, the brain's reward circuits learn to release encouragement in sequence, not in spikes. You are not chasing fireworks. You are laying embers that keep a room warm for years. Breathe once, deeply. As the breath descends, feel how your body reads that as permission. The amygdala, always scanning for threat, settles when you choose a direction and make it small enough to move today. The prefrontal cortex, your wise planner, lights up when you define a next faithful step. Myelin wraps a little tighter around the circuits you repeat. This is not abstract theory, it is embodied practice. Big thinking is not a leap across a canyon. It is a bridge built plank by plank, with each plank laid in peace. Not speed, not noise, not show. Peace. Ancient wisdom has always known this. The voice of Solomon does not seduce with spectacle. It sobers with clarity. Wisdom stands in public places, at the gates where decisions are made, and she invites the listening soul to weigh, to count, to discern. The call is not toward arrogance, but toward order. Know what you have. Know where you are. Know who you serve. Skilled hands, well-ordered work, faithful attention. These are the quiet levers that lift a life. When you honor what is in your care, doors you once begged to open often open of their own accord. Perhaps you have been told that thinking big requires a grand entrance, a dramatic pivot, a sudden event that proves you are worthy. That story exhausts the spirit and confuses the nervous system. The wiser path asks you to begin where your feet stand. Start with the room you already inhabit, the tools already within reach, the people already entrusted to you. Big thinking, rightly understood, is precise thinking about service. Bigger service requires a broader vision, yes, but also cleaner motives and steadier rhythms. Not more frenzy, more fidelity. Imagine with me a simple parable. A traveler comes upon two fields at dawn. In the first, banners flap in a proud wind. The soil is turned in wide, showy swaths, and workers run with great noise. The second field is quiet. Rows are straight. Tools are clean. A ledger rests beneath a clay jar, marked with yesterday's notes. Seed in, water given, pests checked, vine tied. The traveler returns at dusk. The first field has grand stories and little fruit. The second field has no speeches, only baskets, cool and heavy with what the day produced. The lesson is not hidden. Noise is not evidence. Order is. Banners do not feed a household. Baskets do. If you listen closely, you will feel the difference inside your own body. The story of spectacle quickens the pulse, then drops it, then quickens it again. Your chemistry spikes, then crashes. The story of order slows you into a rhythm you can keep. Your nervous system learns safety and structure. Your spirit finds strength in simplicity. Your focus returns. You begin to sense what Solomon meant by the dignity of skill, the nobility of understanding the state of what you oversee. You are not chasing greatness at random. You are consenting to the discipline that makes greatness trustworthy. Let the phrase settle for a moment. The secret to thinking big. Not a trick, not a hack. A secret that was never hidden, only drowned by louder rooms. Big thinking becomes clear when you accept the truth that small is not the enemy of big. Small is how big is born. Small counted, small repeated, small refined. The seed is small, the tree is not. The blueprint is thin, the temple is not. The first ship pushes off quietly. The harbor does not stay the same. Again and again, the pattern holds. Vision clarified, motives purified, practice ordered. Again and again, the life grows. You may ask, will this cost me my tenderness? Must I harden to achieve? Hear this with care. True scale does not harden the heart. It enlarges its capacity. Emotional awareness is not a luxury here. It is essential. Naming what you feel does not slow your progress. It steers it. When you feel fear rise, you are not failing. You are meeting a gate. When you feel envy stir, you are not exposed. You are invited to examine your motives. When you feel weariness press in, you are not weak. You are being called back to rhythms that restore. Compassion for your humanity and clarity about your call can coexist. They must. Let the mind hold a second picture. At the edge of a walled city, the gatekeepers watch the road where caravans return from afar. Some days, nothing arrives. Some days, a single ship crests the horizon. No one panics. No one despairs. They keep the records. They keep the tools sharp. They keep the gate ready. Wisdom lives at that gate. She teaches patience without passivity, action without agitation, waiting without wasting. To think big is to live at that gate. Eyes open for what is coming. Hands faithful with what is here. Before we journey further, make this moment practical. Notice one place where your life feels cramped, not because opportunity is absent, but because attention is scattered. Name it softly. Feel where it sits in your chest or your throat. Breathe into that place until it loosens. Then whisper this to yourself with sincerity. I am allowed to choose ordered excellence over anxious effort. Say it again. This is not indulgence. It is alignment. Your body will believe what you practice. Your future will reveal what you rehearse. We will walk together with care. We will dismantle the myths that keep vision small. We will anchor desire in service. We will stretch our horizons without tearing the fabric of peace. In the next movements, you will see how stewardship defeats scarcity, how the rooms you choose shape your reach, how long horizons and small starts rewire your momentum, how purified motives turn ambition into authority, and how ordered excellence becomes its own elevation. For now, allow the seed of a larger life to rest in good soil. Breathe again. Feel your feet where they are. The distance between where you stand and where you're called is not crossed by one leap. It is crossed by one faithful step, repeated until the ground itself changes. There are seasons when the mind learns a quiet refrain that repeats beneath every plan. Not enough, not ready, not yet. It plays while you stand at the threshold of a decision, and without raising its voice, it shrinks the horizon just enough to keep you safe and small. You feel it in the body as a slight collapse behind the ribs or a subtle tightening in the throat. Scarcity becomes a way of seeing, and what we see long enough begins to feel like truth. Yet another truth patiently waits beside it, gentle and steady. Big thinking is not a costume or a shout. Big thinking is sobriety. It is the calm of someone who knows what is in their care and treats that knowledge as sacred. The caricature says that thinking big looks like spectacle and risk for their own sake, like a life lived on the edge simply to prove something. You have met this caricature and perhaps recoiled from it, fearing that expansion means arrogance, fearing that scale means the loss of your tenderness. The wiser path is quieter. Solomon's wisdom honors those who count before they leap, who understand the state of what they oversee, who allow numbers and names and honest inventory to speak without embarrassment. When you lift your attention from the drama of bigger for its own sake and place it on the dignity of stewardship, energy returns. The system that carries your feelings and your focus begins to trust you again. There is a shift that changes everything, and it begins in the way you hold today. The old pattern says, I need more before I can start. The new pattern says, I will manage well what I have so that it multiplies. In the inner life, this shift is felt not as strain, but as openness, not as a forced march, but as a clean corridor through which effort can move. The heart softens, the shoulders drop. You realize that greatness is not a sudden growth spurt. It is the compounding of orderly care. Imagine a shepherd's ledger resting on a wooden table at dusk. The light is warm. The room is quiet. On each line, a simple record. What arrived? What left? What grew? What was repaired? There is nothing glamorous here, and yet there is strength. The ledger is not mere bookkeeping. It is a mirror that refuses to flatter and refuses to shame. It tells the truth in numbers small enough to guide a single day and steady enough to shape a year. Emotional neuroscience recognizes how such clarity calms the system. When reality is named with kindness and precision, the body reads safety, the mind releases the fog, and effort becomes sustainable. Some people live by a humble rhythm that keeps their vision honest. Each week, they face their resources with calm eyes. They notice time, energy, money, relationships, attention, skill. They do not berate themselves for the gaps, and they do not boast about the gains. They simply see. Then they lift the quality of one essential input by a small and specific margin. 10% better is not bravado. It is permission for excellence to gather without noise. Over time, they learn to observe how inputs and outputs relate, letting feedback teach them where to place their care. This is not a set of orders. It is a description of how stewardship breathes. You may recall seasons when you guessed and then paid for the guess. Guessing carries a certain thrill at the start and a certain ache at the end. Counting feels slower at first, and then it surprises you with relief. There is a kind of courage that does not sprint. It simply returns to the ledger and looks again. What is here? What is growing? What is failing? What deserves another day of attention? What needs a kinder ending? The nervous system prefers this kind of courage because it can predict it. Predictable care becomes a scaffold for bolder vision. Scarcity vision narrows the world to a single question about lack. Steward vision widens the world to many questions about design. Scarcity asks what is missing and stops there. Stewardship asks how today's small pieces fit together so that tomorrow has more to work with. You can feel the difference as you listen. One creates tension without direction. The other creates direction that gradually dissolves tension. Solomon's voice stands with the second. It does not rush you into grand gestures, and it does not excuse you from precision. It calls you to the dignity of attention, where expansion becomes the natural consequence of order. Under the surface of this shift, something tender is happening in the heart. When you steward rather than strive, you cease trying to prove your worth through scale. Worth becomes a settled matter. The work becomes a craft again. The mind slows enough to notice where one thoughtful change would alter a whole chain of events. A single standard raised across a single process leads to a different morning, a different week, a different season. The bigness you once chased starts to arrive unannounced, not as a moment that dazzles, but as a pattern that holds. There is a quiet medicine in tracing cause to effect with patience. When you track inputs to outputs, you uncover how a 15-minute block at the start of the day rescues 2 hours at the end, how one conversation once a week protects a relationship for months, how a 10% improvement in quality transforms the way your work is received. The body recognizes these discoveries the way dry ground recognizes rain, a softening, a readiness, a willingness to keep going. The ledger does not scold. It reveals the levers within reach. Steward vision also restores the link between purpose and provision. When you tend what is in your care, capacity grows, and with it the chance to serve more people in better ways. This is the opposite of self-inflation. It is self-possession in service of something larger and kinder. The spirit settles into a rhythm that is both reverent and practical. You become a keeper of small fires that together warm a city. You become the kind of person to whom doors open because your presence brings order, not noise. There will be days when the old chorus returns and whispers not enough. On those days, it helps to remember that the ledger in the shepherd's hand is not a symbol of scarcity. It is a symbol of trust. Trust in the truth. Trust in process. Trust that careful attention multiplies what it touches. You do not force fruit from the branch. You tend the roots and the soil. You water and prune, and in season the branch answers. The nervous system prefers this pace. The soul does too. Let this chapter leave you with a simple image. A desk at day's end, a small book open, today's lines complete, a breath that goes all the way down, the sense that what you have is enough to begin and wise enough to grow. The question rises almost on its own, not as accusation, but as invitation to clarity. Where am I guessing instead of counting? There are rooms that make the soul smaller. You enter with a bright idea and feel the air thin. The shoulders rise, the words fold back into the mouth. The conversation circles around what cannot be be done and who should not try. Time slows in a heavy way. The nervous system learns to scan for disapproval rather than for possibility, and a subtle fatigue sets in behind the eyes. It is not cruelty that drains you, it is the constant rehearsal of limits. After enough repetitions, even talent begins to whisper that perhaps this is all there is. A common story follows that hush. If the gift is real, the right room will appear and carry you inside. The myth sounds romantic and keeps many lives parked on the curb. The body feels that waiting as a low simmer of frustration and an ache that no rest touches. Emotional patterns start to anchor around the belief that selection is entirely external. In that belief, vision shrinks to fit the smallest invitation. In that belief, excellence becomes a secret practiced in private while the public self treads water. Ancient wisdom points to a different picture. At the edges of a city stand the gates where counsel gathers, decisions are weighed, and reputations are forged. Wisdom raises her voice in the open place and calls the attentive heart to discernment. Gates do not wander the countryside searching for passers-by. People approach them. People stand there with clear eyes and steady breath. To think big in a way that lasts is to treat life like a city of many gates, and to honor the truth that where you linger becomes who you become. Rooms carry a temperature that reaches the body before it reaches the mind. Some rooms cool courage and warm cynicism. Some rooms warm courage and cool impulse. In the generous rooms, standards are high and the atmosphere is kind. Plans are examined with honesty that lands as care, not spectacle. Work is critiqued, and the person is held. The vagus nerve reads safety when challenge arrives with dignity, and that safety turns effort into endurance. You leave with a calm energy that does not need to announce itself. There is another kind of room that lives for applause but forgets practice. The language is grand, the timelines are vague, the stories skip the hard parts. You exit these rooms inflated for an hour and empty by nightfall. The nervous system knows the difference even when the ego does not. It lifts the pulse for show and lowers it in secret. Over time, those cycles wear grooves in the heart that make ambition brittle. The wiser hunger is for rooms where applause arrives after the work, not in place of it. People who grow with purity of motive often curate their gates with quiet intention. They keep a simple map in the mind of 5 places where their craft and character are stretched. A workshop where skill is refined with patience. A table where elders speak plainly about choices and consequences. A circle where service is the measure and ego loses its appetite. A space where rest is honored so that the work can breathe. A forum where ideas are tested with rigor and kindness. The map is not a command. It is a recognition of how environments sculpt outcomes. Across a small season, sometimes 90 days, proximity shifts. Not a dramatic severing, not a spectacle of departure, but a gentle reweighting of time. More hours near the fire that builds stamina. Fewer hours near the drift that builds excuses. The change resides as much in physiology as in schedule. Sleep deepens, focus lengthens. A quiet joy returns to the hands. The mind discovers that the ceiling it feared was attached not to fate, but to furniture. At many gates, there is a counsel that steadies the path. 3 voices with different strengths and the same integrity. One who sees farther and clarifies direction. One who sees deeper and cleans motives. One who sees nearer and keeps craft precise. Their sentences carry the quality of honest light. They do not flatter, they do not scorch, they refine. When such voices touch your plans, your nervous system registers the difference between exposure and care. The first breeds defensiveness. The second breeds courage. The rooms that expand you tend to keep score in uncommon ways. They praise patience over drama. They prize reliability over speed. They protect the dignity of everyone involved. They celebrate a question that improves a process more than a performance that gathers claps. Stand inside such a room for long enough, and the inner weather changes. Anxiety drops by degrees. Curiosity rises by degrees. Tasks that once felt heavy become possible because they are now held inside a larger meaning. Loyalty complicates this choice. Some circles feel like home because they held you when things were thin. Gratitude remains, and still, the soul knows when a season has shifted. Honor does not require stagnation. Love does not require self-shrinkage. The heart can bless a chapter and still step toward another. Solomon's wisdom carries that balance with quiet strength. Keep the affection, keep the truth. Keep moving in the direction where your presence becomes a gift, because the room draws out your best and returns it to the world multiplied. There are signals that a room is right. The mind leaves clearer than it arrived. The body leaves taller without being tense. Commitments feel specific and human-sized. Conversation enlarges vision while narrowing the next step to something doable and honest. Feedback lands in a place that aches and yet thanks you. You find yourself wanting to be cleaner in your motives and steadier in your execution. You notice the disappearance of two familiar companions: urgency without purpose and lethargy without cause. The opposite signals are just as instructive. The story changes with each retelling and the timeline floats. Names are used as currency rather than as people worth honoring. Effort is borrowed from tomorrow to make today look impressive. The spirit senses the tilt and begins to brace. After a while, the brace becomes posture. Posture becomes identity. Identity becomes a small room with ornate mirrors. Big thinking never survives in a hall of mirrors. It needs windows and workbenches and a door that opens before dawn. In the vocabulary of Gates, passivity often masquerades as humility. Waiting for selection looks gentle on the surface and quietly drains decades. Real humility is active. It walks to the threshold without noise, asks for standards, and accepts the shaping that standards require. The body knows real humility by the peace it brings. There is less flinching, less proving, more presence. The eyes meet the eyes across the table. The hands return to the craft. The day ends with a clean kind of tired. The heart of the gate test is simple. Rooms either compress or expand your future. The compression might feel familiar. The expansion might feel strange. Familiar is not always faithful. Strange is not always unsafe. Discernment grows by noticing how a space treats truth, how it holds people, how it honors time, how it deals with failure, how it speaks about those not in the room. With enough noticing, the pattern reveals itself, and pattern is a better guide than promise. By now, the body may recognize a picture: the city at dusk, the gates alive with calm movement, counsel at one corner, craftsmanship at another, service at a third. In this light, the path ahead does not ask for noise. It asks for presence that knows where to stand. The seed of big thinking finds better soil when the surrounding weather is right. Then the growth belongs not to performance, but to order. Which room, if I entered it consistently, would force my next level? Impatience often wears the face of urgency, while quietly teaching the body to give up too soon. The pattern is familiar. A new aim arrives with bright energy. The first stretch feels promising. Early feedback is thin, and the heart begins to wonder if the effort is foolish. In that wondering, many projects are left half-built, and many gifts never learn their full shape. The nervous system is not wrong to react. It is responding to a culture that rewards sparks more than embers, spectacle more than season. Yet beneath the noise, there is another rhythm waiting to be trusted, a rhythm that treats delay not as denial, but as design. There is a story that big thinking requires big launches, that greatness begins with fireworks and proves itself in a single dramatic sweep. That story leaves most people breathless and brittle. The wiser story moves through fields and ports, through vineyards and harbors, through images Solomon would have recognized. Kings plant seeds and think in seasons. Merchant ships bring their returns from afar. The line between sowing and harvest includes long stretches of quiet, where roots deepen out of sight and currents carry what you sent from shore. In those stretches, faithfulness does not look like noise. It looks like steady hands. The body understands seasons when we let it. Emotional life settles when progress is measured in cycles rather than in moments. The brain prefers patterns it can predict. When effort is repeated at a human pace, the system releases encouragement in measured waves, not in spikes that crash by nightfall. Myelin thickens around paths we travel often, which turns effort into ease and noise into music. The point is not to escape challenge. The point is to choose a horizon long enough for compounding to become visible and gentle enough for endurance to feel like peace. Some people begin to live with the calm of long horizons. They choose a time frame that honors the scale of their calling and the gravity of their care. 1,000 days becomes a quiet container that removes panic from the calendar. Inside that container, the questions shift. The focus turns from, did today prove my worth, to did today move the work by one honest inch? This shift is not resignation. It is reverence for how real strength grows. The heart no longer bargains with the clock. It befriends it. Small starts become trustworthy when they are not treated as shameful. The beginning is not the place where you hide. It is the place where the foundation learns its shape. Emotional neuroscience shows that when early actions are sized to be repeatable, the body codes them as safe and the mind chooses them again without drama. A single practice done daily can build more mass than a grand effort done twice and abandoned from exhaustion. The first draft that no one praises still trains the hand. The first client whose name you know by memory teaches you the contours of service. The first lesson delivered with trembling builds a voice that does not need to tremble forever. Consider a harbor at dawn. The ship that leaves is not loud. The crew knows their roles. The ropes release with quiet precision. The water is patient. Hours pass without news. Then days. Then more days. Somewhere out of sight, the crew trades skill for goods and risk for wisdom. When they return, there is weight in the hold, not a story about almost. Far journeys do not reward the one who cannot bear delay. They honor the one who trusts the route, keeps the tools clean, and reads the weather without panic. Thinking big in a way that lasts resembles that voyage. It is less about conquering distance and more about consenting to distances that change you while you cross them. The temptation to chase instant wins often grows loud when fatigue meets uncertainty. That is the hour when shortcuts shine with false light. The cost is hidden in what shortcuts do to the soul. They train you to love applause more than craft, and to mistake motion for movement. Over time, a quiet erosion sets in. Standards drift, promises swell, peace thins. The wiser path holds to a cadence where improvement is small and specific, where each pass through the work raises quality a little and reveals the next clean edge. Gentle compounding turns ordinary days into engines that pull far more than their size suggests. There is a grace that appears when efforts are treated like micro-bets made with honesty. Not gambling, not frenzy, simply small, testable actions that respect reality and invite feedback. These actions do not demand a crown on day one. They ask a simpler question. Did this create value a little more clearly than yesterday? Did this remove friction from one corner of the process? Did this teach me something I can keep? The nervous system likes questions that can be answered with evidence. Each answer chips away at fear and leaves in its place a grounded kind of confidence. Vineyard cultivation carries this wisdom in its bones. Rows do not straighten themselves. Soil does not prepare itself. Vines do not tie themselves against wind and gravity. The work is repetitive and reverent. The beauty shows after long obedience to small tasks that seem unremarkable while you do them. The first season teaches you the field. The next season teaches you your limits. Another season teaches you the weather of your own heart. Then one day, a harvest feels inevitable, not because it was guaranteed, but because care laid down such a long road behind you that the future had something sturdy to follow. Impatience often masks fear, not fear of work, but fear of being seen beginning, fear of not dazzling on the first try, fear of learning in public. That fear compresses vision into a fragile shell, beautiful from a distance and empty up close. Long horizons puncture that shell and allow air to circulate. When the timeline is generous, permission rises to improve the process without the shame of revision. Craft becomes a conversation with time rather than a contest against it. The heart no longer flinches each time it meets a rough edge, because rough edges are understood as an honest stage in the making of something durable. In this slower room, excellence becomes less dramatic and more dependable. Quiet systems appear where chaos once slept. Mornings open with rhythms that protect attention. Evenings close with notes that teach the next day. The mind rests because it is no longer tasked with inventing a miracle each hour to feel safe. Peace returns not as absence of effort, but as presence of order. This is the texture of a life aligned with seasons. This is the relief that allows the body to stop bracing and start building. Delay as design does not mean postponing joy. It means discovering a kinder form of joy that travels with you. The joy is found in the weight of a well-used tool, in the way a sentence lands cleaner than it did last week, in the way a customer's eyes soften when the service truly fits their need, in the way the numbers whisper a story of quiet ascent. None of this requires spectacle. All of this requires patience that is alive, not passive, patience that listens, adjusts, and moves by degrees toward a horizon that no longer threatens to vanish. There will be days when the sky is gray and the shore looks the same as it did a month ago. The mind will ask if the voyage is worth the weather. The vineyard will look still. The ledger will look plain. On those days, memory matters. Remember the cycles that built every durable thing you admire. Remember the unglamorous hours that became a melody others now hum. Remember the merchant who counted his days by tides and traded noise for knowledge. Yours is the same lineage. Yours is the same quiet strength. The secret underneath the secret is simple. Instant wins may start stories, but compounding cycles finish them. The soul knows this and relaxes when it hears it said aloud. The body knows this and steadies when it feels the rhythm in the bones. The mind knows this and clears space for the next small beginning to take its place in a longer arc. From here, the question rises as naturally as breath. What small seed will I water for 1,000 days? There is a tremor that runs through even the bravest plans. It starts as a small question that many keep secret. If I grow, will I become someone I do not respect? The fear sits close to the heart and often disguises itself as modesty. Better to keep the dream small than risk becoming hard or hollow. That fear is understandable, and it is heavy. It has kept many gifts quiet and many rooms dim. Yet there is another way to think about bigness that lifts the weight without inflating the ego. It begins with the soul looking gently at why it wants what it wants. Humility is often mistaken for shrinking. That confusion teaches people to dim their light so no one feels discomfort. The result is a different kind of discomfort that never speaks its name, a life that is smaller than the truth of the person living it. Real humility does not mean thinking small. Real humility means thinking clear. It means a vision large enough to hold other people's good and a heart steady enough to carry that goodness without performance. When humility is clear, expansion feels like service and not self-display. Solomon's story offers a clean mirror. When granted the chance to ask for anything, he chose wisdom to serve his people. Abundance followed as a byproduct rather than as a trophy. The order matters. Wisdom first, service first, then abundance as a consequence rather than as an obsession. In this order, ambition is not an enemy. Ambition becomes a riverbed that channels strength towards something that heals and builds. The spirit relaxes in that riverbed because it recognizes the shape of care. The body reads motives even when the mind cannot yet name them. When an aim is driven by proving, the heart quickens in a brittle way. The jaw sets, the breath thins, effort becomes sharp and noisy. When an aim is driven by service, the body softens even as it exerts itself. Shoulders drop, breath deepens, focus brightens without burning. Emotional neuroscience helps explain the difference. Proving chases spikes that crash. Serving builds steady signals that sustain. One burns sugar, the other builds strength. There is a quiet practice some people carry in their inner life. Before the work grows, they hold the desire up to a warm light and let honest questions pass through it. Why me? Why now? Who benefits? These are not tests designed to shame. They are kind doors that open to deeper rooms. Sometimes the light reveals that a part of the plan is trying to fix an old wound with applause. No condemnation is needed, only clarity. A small rearrangement of purpose turns the energy from restless to reliable. Pure ambition has a texture you can feel. It steadies your hands. It brightens your voice without straining it. It makes improvement feel like devotion instead of punishment. It allows standards to rise without making love conditional. In this texture, the nervous system is not bracing against the work. It is bracing for the work the way a runner braces for a clean start. The difference is subtle and it shapes everything. Peace is not the absence of effort. Peace is effort held inside a worthy reason. When motives are clear, decisions that once felt tangled begin to loosen. Pricing, partners, timelines, promises. The fog lifts a little because the compass points toward value rather than toward vanity. You find that a smaller audience can feel large when they are genuinely helped. You find that a slower timeline can feel fast when waste is removed. You find that criticism cuts less when the aim is service and the method is honest. The amygdala still watches for threat, but it stops confusing correction with danger. The refiner's fire is an old image with a modern heart. Metal enters the heat as a mix of strong and weak. Impurities rise and are lifted away. What remains is not less. What remains is more itself. Ambition becomes authority only after this kind of warmth. The heat in our day often arrives as pressure, deadlines, visibility, stakes. None of these are enemies when motives are sound. They become precise warmth that brings clarity to the surface, so it can be kept, and the noise of ego so it can be skimmed. Self-glory is a hungry guest. It arrives early, asks for the best seat, and leaves crumbs for everyone else. Value creation is a different guest. It arrives modestly, fills the table, and stays to help with the dishes. In rooms shaped by value, success feels generous because it has made someone else's road smoother. In such rooms, even failure becomes useful because it teaches the craft in ways that help the next person travel farther with fewer bruises. This is what scale can look like when motive is clean. More people helped, more dignity protected, more doors opened for those who follow. There is still a shadow that wanders near the edges of big dreams. The fear of greed, the fear of becoming the very kind of person you once promised never to become. Shadows lose their size when named with tenderness. Wanting to care for your family is not greed. Wanting to build something that lasts is not greed. Greed is hunger that forgets names and stories. Pure ambition remembers names. Pure ambition remembers stories. It measures the rightness of a result by the well-being it leaves behind. Real leaders carry another signal. When asked what matters most, they can say a sentence that fits on a single breath, a sentence that reveals the heartbeat beneath the numbers and the plans. In that sentence, you hear a promise that refuses exploitation and a standard that refuses mediocrity. People feel safe near this kind of clarity because it does not use them as fuel. It invites them into work that respects their dignity and honors their limits while asking for their best. The nervous system responds to motive like soil responds to rain. Authentic purpose loosens the ground so roots can drink. The mind grows less defensive and more creative. Ideas show up that were shy before. Collaboration becomes possible because trust has a place to stand. Pressure still visits, but it does not crush. It clarifies. You begin to notice tiny proofs that your reasons are sound. A client returns without being asked. A team member brings an idea without fear. A quiet thank you arrives at the right time and says more than applause ever could. A life built on pure ambition will still meet days of doubt and hour-long storms. On those days, it helps to remember the order again, wisdom to serve, then abundance as fruit. Return to that order in your thoughts, and you will feel your chest open by degrees. Return to that order in your work, and you will see how even small adjustments in motive change the way outcomes land in your hands. Heavy outcomes feel lighter. Fragile outcomes feel sturdier. Wins do not need to shout to be real. When the heart carries clean ambition, excellence ceases to be a contest against other people. It becomes a covenant with the craft. That covenant sounds simple when spoken aloud. Do the work with care. Keep the promises clear. Let the gains enlarge what is good. The sound may be simple, but the practice is powerful. It frees energy that was trapped in comparison and pours it into creation. It turns rivalry into respect and suspicion into partnership. It builds rooms where people want to stay because the air holds truth and kindness at the same time. There is an old comfort in knowing that the path to trustworthy scale is not hidden. It is not a puzzle designed to torment. It is a pattern repeated across centuries. Servant wisdom before status. Clean motives before more reach. Order before spectacle. When the pattern is honored, growth does not require a mask. You can be both ambitious and honest, both driven and tender. The world is better when that combination walks its streets. If my goal succeeds, who besides me wins? Overwhelm often arrives dressed as importance. The calendar looks heroic. The plans sound large, yet underneath the noise, the results waver, and the heart grows tired of rescuing every deadline at the last minute. In that fatigue, the body sends honest messages, a heaviness in the chest before starting, a fog behind the eyes when switching tasks, a restless sleep that never quite restores. What feels like a lack of talent is often a lack of order. What feels like a ceiling is often a pattern. The relief many chase in bigger goals is frequently found in cleaner standards. The myth says that big picture thinkers are made for chaos, and that details are a prison for smaller minds. The truth is kinder and stronger. The truth is that elevation follows excellence the way a shadow follows a body in sunlight. Skilled workers stand before kings, not because they demand it with volume, but because their work, repeated with integrity, speaks in a language that gates understand. Gatekeepers hear reliability as respect. They hear precision as love for the craft. The path that looked mysterious begins to look inevitable when the work becomes trustworthy. Ordered excellence is not an obsession with perfection. It is a devotion to clarity. It is the quiet courage to decide what good looks like and to keep that picture in view when speed tries to negotiate it down. In the nervous system, this devotion feels like safety. The amygdala stops firing at every unknown because the process has fewer unknown. The prefrontal cortex can plan without panic because the steps are clear enough to follow on a tired day. The body relaxes into rhythm. The mind begins to trust the hands again. Some people carry a private standard that sits like a North Star over their work. They know the difference between more and better, and they choose better. Their version of 10 times is not louder, it is cleaner. Edges align, promises match delivery. Little frictions that steal energy are named and softened. When they speak about quality, they sound unhurried because they are not negotiating against themselves. The standard is not a whip. It is a shelter that protects the work from the weather of mood and noise. Behind dependable excellence, there is almost always a small set of living documents that hold the bones of the craft. Not ornate binders forgotten on a shelf. Simple sequences that breathe. A beginning that is always the beginning. A middle that always checks the same few truths. An ending that closes loops and leaves tomorrow in form. Emotional life brightens in the presence of this kind of structure. The brain loves repetition that respects reality. Habits form where confusion used to live. Energy that once patched chaos is released to create. There is a rhythm that quietly changes outcomes. Measure, improve, repeat. Not as a slogan that shouts from a wall, as a heartbeat felt inside the work. The loop is gentle and specific. Evidence replaces guesswork. Small upgrades replace grand swings. The body recognizes the relief. Muscles unclench because the path forward no longer depends on mood. Confidence grows from data sized for a human day. Peace becomes practical because it is tied to process rather than to luck. Occasional brilliance can be dazzling and still leave a life malnourished. Reliable standards feed people. They feed teams. They feed families. They feed futures. In reliable standards, there is a kind of mercy. The mercy of not requiring heroics to keep promises. The mercy of not using adrenaline as glue. The mercy of leaving room for recovery so that excellence is sustainable. Big thinking that ignores this mercy burns out its best people and empties its own message. Big thinking that honors this mercy becomes a place where many can breathe and build. The image of a blueprint belongs here, not a sketch that moves each time pressure rises. A drawing measured enough to survive scrutiny. The temple rose from precise lines that honored weight and wind and time. The plumb line was not an insult to inspiration. It was the partner that turned inspiration into a structure that carries generations. In our day, the plumb line appears as checklists that catch fatigue and templates that capture hard-won learning. Creativity does not shrink under these lines. It flourishes because it knows where to stand. Ordered excellence feels different in the body than frantic effort. There is warmth in the hands rather than a shake. There is lift in the chest rather than a brace. Attention stays where it is placed without being yanked from task to task by fear. The vagus nerve reads the predictability of the work as permission to focus. The reward system stops chasing novelty and starts rewarding completion. What once required willpower begins to require only presence. Presence becomes possible because the day is no longer a moving target. When this law takes root, ordinary moments begin to carry unusual weight. The way a file is named reduces future friction. The way a meeting is framed respects the attention of everyone involved. The way a promise is worded protects both parties from confusion. None of this looks dramatic. All of it adds up. Excellence becomes a culture rather than a stunt. Results begin to arrive in a way that feels both earned and peaceful. Trust grows in the spaces between headlines because the small things have been tended with care. Elevation does not need to be chased when excellence can be found. The rooms you hope to enter start to notice the consistency of your presence. The people you hope to serve begin to rely on the taste of your work. Opportunities appear that would have broken a fragile system but now fit because the system is steady. The growth that comes through order does not ask you to become someone else. It asks the best of who you are to become repeatable. It asks your values to show up in the way the work is done, not just in the way the work is described. There will still be days that do not sparkle, days when the standard feels heavy and the process feels slow. On those days, it helps to remember that order is not a cage. Order is a trellis. Vines do not lose their nature when they climb. They gain sunlight, they gain air, they gain fruit. The spirit that once felt caged by rules begins to recognize the difference. One set of rules was fear masking as control. This set of rules is love given a shape that can be shared. Which single standard, if raised today, would change my results this month? There is a kind of practice that travels with you. It does not demand spectacle or punish missteps. It settles into the day like a steady drum very close to the heart. Big thinking becomes livable when it is carried by this kind of rhythm, a rhythm that treats attention as a scarce treasure and order as an act of care. Many find that evenings hold a quiet power. A small book opens on a table and the day speaks in simple lines. What arrived, what left, what grew, what needs mending. The review is gentle rather than dramatic. The nervous system reads the honesty as safety and releases its grip. Sleep meets you without a fight, because the truth has been named without blame. The map of your rooms begins to take shape inside this calm. 5 places rise to the surface where your courage warms rather than cools. A place where skill is refined with patience. A table where seasoned voices lend clarity without noise. A circle that keeps service at the center. A space that honors recovery so the work can breathe. A forum that tests ideas with rigor and kindness. Time leans toward these rooms as if drawn by gravity, and slowly the body associates growth with the atmosphere they provide. Somewhere in this week, a long horizon is named. One seed that deserves 1,000 days. Not a vow made in adrenaline. A quiet promise made in daylight. The moment you give that seed a name, the mind ceases to bargain with the clock. Urgency shifts from frantic to focused. The pulse steadies. The horizon no longer threatens. It invites. Motive clarifies next. A single sentence appears that fits on one breath and tells the truth about why the work exists. It remembers people rather than applause. It remembers the difference the work wants to make when no one is watching. The body recognizes the tone of that sentence and softens. Decisions that once tangled begin to loosen because the aim is clean. Standards rise without drama. One element of the craft is lifted from good to better. From vague to precise, edges align, promises match delivery. The change is small to the eye and large to the outcome. Peace grows because the work no longer depends on a heroic move. It depends on a repeatable way of moving. The shoulders drop, focus holds. 3 simple sequences begin to carry the weight. A beginning that is always the beginning, so energy does not scatter. A middle that checks the same few truths, so quality does not drift. An ending that closes loops so tomorrow inherits a clear table. The brain loves this predictability. Myelin thickens around the paths that matter. Effort turns into ease by degrees. At week's end, a gentle loop closes. What was measured becomes instruction for what will improve. What improved becomes the new normal. The loop does not shout, it breathes. Evidence replaces guesswork, and the nervous system lowers its cost of doing business. You feel it as a clean kind of tired that carries satisfaction rather than depletion. This rhythm does not shrink the soul, it frees it. The ledger is not a cage. It is a trellis where living things can climb. The rooms are not performances. They are climates that protect growth. The long horizon is not distance to fear. It is distance that shapes. The clear motive is not a slogan. It is a compass. The standard is not a whip. It is shelter. The sequences are not chains. They are pathways back to peace when the day grows loud. In this quiet order, the secret to thinking big stops feeling like a secret. It feels like the natural consequence of truth told gently, care given consistently, and time treated as a partner rather than an enemy. What would this week look like if peace set the pace and order carried the weight? The room is quiet again, and the questions that began this journey have softened into something steadier. You have walked past the old ceiling and found that it was made of habit more than fate. The body feels it first. The breath sits lower. The jaw unclenches. The heart beats with a weight that does not threaten. This is what happens when desire finds order and order finds its voice. The life expands without shouting. The images remain like markers along a trusted road, a ledger that tells the truth without shame. City gates where counsel gathers and courage is warm. A vineyard that grows through seasons that do not perform for anyone. Merchant ships that vanish and return with quiet weight in the hold. A plumb line that refuses to flatter and therefore allows beauty to stand. These are not ornaments. They are anchors that keep vision from drifting when the weather changes. Under every chapter lived a single patience. Wisdom first, service first, then abundance in its time. Emotional life rests inside that sequence because it no longer has to negotiate with the ego each hour. The nervous system prefers this peace. The mind becomes creative in ways that are useful rather than explosive. The soul stops trying to prove and starts to provide. You can feel the difference. The work carries you forward even on unremarkable days. The world may still offer its rush and its mirrors. Promises will still arrive with more volume than substance. On those days, memory will be the companion that saves you. Remember the ledger and the gate. Remember the 1,000-day seed and the refiner's warmth. Remember that ordered excellence opens doors that panic cannot find. Remember that rooms shape futures, and that you are allowed to choose climates where your best self is invited to stay. Nothing essential was built here by accident. You counted with kindness, and the numbers told a story that gave strength. You drew near to rooms that stretch you without tearing you. You granted your work a horizon long enough for compounding to have a chance. You cleaned your motives until ambition became gentle and strong. You lifted standards until reliability felt like mercy. This is the texture of a life that can hold greater weight without cracking. Let the final picture be simple. A city at dusk, gates alive with calm movement, a table where wisdom is not rare, a field that will be green again in its season, a harbor with sails on the line, a sanctuary raised from careful lines and honest hands. In that light, the phrase that brought us here loses its secrecy. The secret to thinking big is not hidden. It is a pattern felt in the bones. Steward what is here. Choose rooms that expand you. Trust seasons more than sparks. Clean the motive until service shines. Build order that can be repeated without breaking the heart. What if thinking big is less about size and more about sacred order that multiplies quietly? Which single standard will you raise this week?